Hi everyone, welcome to the workshop. So I'm gonna talk about a little bit about myself. So I made a lot of VR animation, and some of them are in VR. You can see like Wired in Quest right now, and also some of them are outside of VR. It's actually in traditional 3D workflow, and there are just a lot of storytelling, like infinity of possibilities that you can do in there. And I love League of Legends, so I create some like fun films for them, and many of them actually I collaborate with Riot to just produce something for them. So this is something really exciting, and I want just to bring this to you, like how to work, from Quill to any 3D program of your choice. And the workflow is the same, and I'm gonna just tell you about the Scene 40. How do you set up that workflow? And this is something I want to talk about. Is there are comparative advantage of both softwares. Excuse me. So Quill is very fast at modeling and animation, and it's just there's so many tools. You can puppeteer your character, and there are, like, if you want to create wings, you can easily create that with your hand gestures. But it's very slow at shading and shadows. If you look at this scene, you can see those shadows are actually very hard to create. You're not like painting this side of the cube. You basically create another side of the building and paint it. And this is actually very time consuming. And also you need to know very deeply about the painting. Like say this shadow, it needs to reflect the skylight. That's why it's painted bluer and also lighter. And also this part of the shadow is greener because it has to reflect the leaves. So all of those you have to take account into making this scene to make it feel realistic. But it's really just super time consuming. And on the other hand, Cinema 40 is very slow at modeling and animation, and all those organic forms is actually super hard to rig and also animate. But it's actually very fast at shading and shadow. So you just put a lights on, and all this thing is actually one light source above the characters, and you can move that light anywhere you want. So it's dynamic. Unlike this Quill scene, it's actually really hard for the sun to move to the noon and move to the afternoon, and without you having to really you have to really change the scene to
frame by frame lighting.
Yeah, every shadow is faked. So what if we can combine both workflow, and it's super easy to model and animate, and also super easy to render. So this is what we're gonna talk about today. The first part, I'm gonna show you the making of the Disc Ooze project, which is on the cover. You might see that, and I'm gonna show you the behind the scenes, the working files, and to let you know what it looked like behind the scene. And then I'm gonna give you a demo of the Quill to Cinema 40 workflow. So how to just start the first stroke in Quill and then just animate it and export it and import it and the whole thing. And also the tips and tricks. And those are the things that's more advanced, and that's something I also discovered through the workflow, and I think it's just so worth sharing, like retaining motion blur, timeline management, and also cameras, etc. And depending how much time I'm gonna have, I'm gonna just keep talking about the tips and tricks. And also there's Q&A. Just ask me any questions if you have any. And now let's go to the demo. And I'm just gonna first show you the Cinema 40 of this scene. So now you can look at all those characters in the Cinema 40 file. So remember, this is actually what it looks like in the final render. So this is actually without any post effects I done later. This is actually, I render it out and I just upload it. It's immediately a film. And all of this, I didn't animate anything in here. If I play it, it's gonna run very slowly because it's rendering. So it takes time to render every frame. But you see, the motion blur and those little lighting speculars come free with Octane renders. So everything's already in there. Also the reflections, you can see it has a lot of color details in them. And if I turn off this light, you will see immediately everything goes dark. So it's a very simple light setup, just one light above the characters. So I'm gonna then go back to the Quill scene to take a look at what the actual scene looks like. So now I am in the Quill scene. The immediate thing you find is actually everything looks quite bland. There's not too much gradient happening. So this is the first tip. If you are gonna create something you know later is gonna be in other 3D program, you want to only paint the diffuse color. So basically what this object looks like in overcast or cloudy day. So there's no shadows underneath anything. You can see that. Okay, just want to confirm you can see the stream. And there is no specular. So if I want to add highlights, I did not like paint any highlights on it. So you really want to keep it really plain. So any color you don't want to shade it. It's very difficult for your eyes. Basically, everything merge into one blob of color. So that's why I turn on this wireframe. So I know like it's separated and I know the volume of this object. But I actually really have to keep it in one solid color. And also you will notice there's not too much other light source, but the floor. The reason I create the floor because I want the light to bounce to the floor and bounce back to the characters. I know I'm gonna have the key light is from the above, but I also want the field lights actually generated by the floor, so the light can actually hit both sides of the character. So all of those I plan ahead, so I know what I'm gonna do before I make this scene. And then I know I want this process to be very improvised. And that is something I love about Quill is that you improvise in the software and you don't storyboard beforehand. Like unless it is commission work, you actually want to have fun and just to animate things. So I'm gonna just press play. So everything here is actually improvised. And during this improvisation, you start to notice like some of the actions actually choreographed with other characters, like this Caesar actually cutting the bamboo character, and also the rock actually hitting this this character, maybe like a waiter or something. And this is, some other interactions between the elephant and this shell-like creature. And so you will see a lot of interesting thing happens, but you didn't plan this too much ahead. You basically creating one character, and then you realize, wait, it will be interesting to having it, interact with others. So this whole zoo of strange creatures is actually just a lot of improvisation, and it's actually very easy to do this in Quill. So I'm gonna just start to going into a new file. Let's go to the demo file. So the demo file, we only have the plane. And this is where I actually start to create a character to let you see the whole process. So I'm going to select a brush. This brush is nice. Let's select. So this is the color palette. If you look closely, this is the only color I used in the animation. So you have to make sure you choose wisely about the colors. And one simple rule about the color theory is actually, from all the colors like red, yellow, blue, green, exclude one color. You don't want all 4 colors to be in your scene. So in this case, I exclude blue. So we only have like greenish color. Like this is kind of greenish. It's not really like purplish blue. And this is like yellow, and this is red. So there's nothing really go to like blue in this scene. So it makes the color looks like good because this is part of the color theory. You want to limit your color palette. The more the color palette is actually the worse for the viewer to see. So that's why I plan out the color palette beforehand. This is the only thing I plan. I actually like have to test what color looks good. And also part of the color theory is you want to only have very few saturated color and keep other colors kind of desaturated less like look at here, it's very desaturated. And this one is just mildly saturated. Only the red is like very saturated. So all of those make your scene looks curated and also like a higher taste, if I could say that. So yeah, just to keep everything grayscale and only few colors like that. Okay, and that's enough about color theory. And just to pick a color and just paint in the scene. Like here's a new layer. Okay, maybe like a snail, so something like this. And I'm gonna change the color and make a shell, the triangular shell, just to keep things interesting. And also the antenna. So now we have a simple character. It's like super quick. Like in like 10 seconds, I create a snail.
Masterpiece.
Yeah, it wouldn't be possible in Maya or anything else. So here is the catch here. So if you wanted to work with the 3D software outside of Quill, you want to make sure the point is actually consistent. And what do I mean by point being consistent? Is to actually look at those triangles. All of those triangles are made of points, and not like one-to-one, but if you look at far, it actually made of like many, like hundreds of thousands triangles. And it's actually easier to see if you actually optimize the scene, right? If you actually, where's the, okay, here. Like if you increase the optimization, now it has fewer triangles, but also fewer points. So the 3D software will be confused and saying, okay, I don't know how to interpolate between you two because you have like 300 points and you have like only 50 points. And then there will be no motion blur, or there will be no interpolation inside of a Blender or Cinema 4D. So at the very end, it's gonna show a little arrow, a little red arrow on your 3D program, showing, oh, this character doesn't work in our 3D program because the point number changed. So that's why this is the first suggestion, is to always keep your point number if you want to do 3D render outside of. Also, you want to keep the motion blur. You want to keep the point number consistent. And also, even if you keep the point number consistent, but if you choose to use any of those tools, like copy selection to the current frame, like you want to copy the first frame to the third frame, despite it has the same point number, but the numbers are actually on different points. So this is something more advanced in 3D. Let's say this point is the number 1 point in this snail, but if you copied it again, this number 1 point will appear like somewhere here. The 3D program will code it as this is the number 1 and this is the 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. So then the computer also confused. So the solution is actually just duplicate the first layer. So this is the first frame, and I duplicate it. And always keep this at hand. Never delete it. Only after you finish this project, you say, okay, now I can delete this frame. Because this gives you an extra copy that has the exact same point number in your file. So no matter how you screw up the scene, you can always return to this 2 frame that's interpolated. I hope that makes sense. I will show that. So what happens if you don't do this? And also
so basically, if I can jump in, for example, like AnimBrush doesn't work, right, in this case, because AnimBrush in every frame, it creates like a new vertex ID mesh that Cinema 4D or other applications wouldn't understand as the same mesh. So it would only work, like, for example, if you have a character like this that you manipulate, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you in your mind, you really have to treat this as a stop motion. You will tell yourself, okay, I already finished making the puppet. This is it. I'm no longer going to add any feather or any other things on it. And this is where I start to animate it. And this is the limitation, of course, like sometimes we want to add an eye, but you want to add that on an extra layer. It is possible, but never on this same layer because you're going to have different point number. Okay, let's just animate it. So now I already duplicated. And here's the one thing. This onion skin only show like 3 to the JSON file or all frames. the onion skin. So if I turn on the all, you will see all the snail. So I'm gonna animate a little bit. So if I animate it and I want it to loop, if I haven't duplicated the first layer to the last, it would be actually super hard for me to, have a perfect loop, because I start to lose track of where the first frame is, even if I turn on the all onion skin. And then I don't know how to end it smoothly, because in animation you want to smoothly easing to your last frame. You want to have this, I want to animate it a little bit offset, and then I have a larger offset, and then I'm having an even larger offset. So this is what in animation we can have. We can see it actually is back to the place. And the other things is pretty random. I just want to showcase motion blur here. Like if I do a very abstract, like very far away motion, this is something the computer will do the work for you to try to add motion over there. So this is just a quick animation. It doesn't actually make sense. No snails, do this, but it will showcase like you need to copy the first frame just to make sure you can safely loop to this point. So if I add a little loop here, so now you can see it actually reset back to the original place. So if I want to export this thing out to Cinema 4D, what I have to do is actually just go to the export, and I want to select only the visible layer. So the floor and also the snail. So I'm gonna do export, go to Alembic. This is the file type I use, and pick export animation. I have done some examples. I'm gonna just name it demo 3. I'm gonna just export. So now this animation will be exported, and this is where we go back to Cinema 4D, and we can actually go back straight to this this file we have here, and we want to add a new character. So we want to go here, merge project. This is the language for Cinema 4D to import. So in Blender, there will be an import button here, and you're gonna say import Alembic. So I'm gonna merge that. We have demo 3. We're gonna press open. And 12 frames per second. This is exactly like what we have in Quill. So that's perfect. So now we have the snail, and we can rotate a little bit to make it face us. Okay, this is very small in the 1080p, but yeah, it's rotated. So now this whole thing is actually animated. So just like what we had in the Quill. So you can see this whole process very smooth. You don't do anything more work to get the animation. The animation is already in the file. But what you're gonna do is to have the color information here. So I'm gonna do the material. You can do it any way you want. You can do it in Redshift or Octane. This is in Octane. So just create a glossy material, drag it onto the snail, and also you can start to getting the color information by accessing the texture, effects, and I'm gonna move it up a little bit, otherwise you couldn't see. And the effects and vertex map, it's down here. So it's called vertex map. So basically,
that's vertex color.
Yeah, effects and vertex map. So that's what I select. So the menu is down there, but it's what I select is the vertex map. You have to tap into the vertex map, and you want to pick this little arrow here and pick any of those Alembic information. I will pick the one here. So immediately you can see the color go back to your Cinema 4D scene. And this is just automatic. And then you want to start to play with your materials. So now it's very shiny. You can see in the antenna here and also the tail. So want to just to make it rough a little bit. So now it's actually, I'm gonna play back again. So look here. So if I increase the roughness, it actually become rougher and more like clay. Of course, we have to add a little bump channel. So this is where we want to show the details of the clay. We can add the texture and adding noise. So without doing anything, you can already see there's little bumps up there. If it's not obvious, I can increase the contrast. But yeah, it's there. It's just the screen size is so small, you couldn't see it. And also you can change the UV mapping. Like you can make it like a cubic mapping, and it will have a different texture on it. You can test it around the settings. But you see like this is actually quite cubic. So this is where you want to smooth it out. And you can tap on this. This is a subdivision. And now you have something in your object list. You can drag this whole snail under the subdivision. And immediately you can see it becomes smoother. So this is before and this is after. You can see immediately it's smooth around the edges. It actually looks like a worm, right? It's like so smooth. And of course, you can have it on different layers. So you can make this has very sharp edges and make this have like an organic form. And all of those are non-destructive. So you can turn it on and off anytime. Also, it preserves the animation. So if I jump ahead, you will see the animation. And now is where I start to introduce the motion blur. We know we intentionally make this animation very strange, just to want to show the motion. And we want to add a little tag here. So this is the, of course, every program have different tags. And this is the octane tag, which enables the motion blur. And I'm just gonna say vertex, transform vertex. So now it knows there's vertex information. It's gonna read that. So now you can see the motion blur. This is the computer is doing the calculation behind the scene and try to just make the motion blur happen. And this is why we want to keep the number of points consistent, because now it shows green. It means it's actually working. If it shows other color, so if it's gray, it means there's no animation like this one. It shows just simple A with gray. If it's red, it means the number of points is corrupted. It's not working. So this is the example of how you can actually quickly make a snail within 10 seconds and also import it, and immediately you have the animation right here. You can now render it out with no problem. So this is...
Question, Zeyu. Yeah. When you smoothed the mesh, right, did you do like a merge vertices with a very small number before? Because I noticed that quill strokes are open, right, the curves. Yeah. So sometimes you get like this sharp edge, and maybe I missed that step, but did you do like a merge vertices at some point?
Do you mean the cap, like here?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's like, for example, if you use that sphere brush that you used, right? There's one seam that when you smooth it, it doesn't get smooth because the curve is open, right? So if you smooth it, can you smooth it again?
Yeah, I can smooth it again.
And then rotate around the snail, like, okay. So we can... There might be like one sharp edge somewhere.
Okay, and there's a seam, right?
Yeah, the seam, yeah. So I always have to like merge vertices with a very small number to get rid of that seam.
Yeah.
Do you do that too? Or?
You can. I can do it in still render, but not in. It would destroy the points. So every time when I try to stitch the points, or when I try to modify a spline, it always make this the whole.
Oh, that's interesting. In Maya, when you do merge vertices on an Alembic geometry cache container, it actually still maintains also the motion blur and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's one way to do that using the connect. It's something actually I use. Like if now immediately you see it's actually different. It's actually try to connect the closest points.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is actually, I think, what you try to do in Maya is actually, connecting. It will see the tolerance. You can actually increase this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, this is
just
something.
Just to get rid of the seam, right? Sometimes.
Yeah. So this is something I didn't do for the forest because everything is already quite strange. People are not gonna notice this. But if you do a realistic human face, definitely gonna put this on. And now, since I already rotate this, see how this floor, I changed the color from gray to orange. And this is also a very intentional thing I do. Is actually to increase the bounce light. So now you see this bounce warm light actually hitting the snail. Actually make this thing looks like more easy to read because there's something underneath it's casting this light, right? So compared to the gray one, like now I enable the gray floor, you see this light disappear and everything looks grayish and doesn't have too much life. So this is before and after. You can see clearly how the bounce light contribute to the overall feeling of this scene. And this is how I actually create a short animation in Quill and export it here. And now I'm going to go back to Quill just to show some advanced tips to create those kind of animation. And also anytime if you have a question, you can let me know. So here I'm in Quill. And now I'm going to talk about the timeline. So you can see that there is groups of my animation. And those groups actually, I can move the timeline like back or in the front. This is something I can do in Quill. But however, this information doesn't carry over to 3D program. So this is something if you want to keep the motion blur, this is actually, you need to mark your time and try to offset it later in Quill. But sometimes if you want to not have the motion blur, this is what I will do, is to create a new layer and just to, have like a new character around here. So, okay, invisible, and make it a different color. So this one is gonna be like a giant eye. So now, if I wanted this character to appear very late, I need to make sure I create something at the very beginning. So this is something like I'm gonna make the brush very tiny, just gonna paint a little bit and move it outside of the screen and throw it somewhere else. And now this information will be registered by Cinema 4D and will make sure this character only appear later in the scene. So you will have this effect, right? And this is something, it's a workaround because the Cinema 4D couldn't know if you move the timeline like this. So that's why this is something you gotta plan before you make the animation, because the timeline, like moving timeline, offsetting timeline, is something only inside of Quill. Cinema 4D is gonna ignore everything you do here. So it's gonna just push everything in the beginning. It's gonna detect the first frame that actually has anything in it. So that's why I need to put something out there. Of course, that will disrupt a number of points, but that's what I do in the Fix My Moon short. And that is the stop motion. You see a moon base that's been built in time lapse. And in time lapse, there's no stop motion blur. So that's what I did, is to creating those small placeholders at the very beginning of that character, just to make it, this timeline to export it to Cinema 4D. Otherwise, you will have to do it manually in Cinema 4D to find where this character appear. So that is one tip that I always use.
It's funny, I use the exact same thing.
Right.
That little dot outside of the viewfinder.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to export it, that's actually the quick way to do it. And also, when I did characters, so I could duplicate this snail. I will always move the smallest thing, and this is something I think everyone familiar with Quill would start to know this. You only move the whole thing at the very end. You want to find the smallest thing to animate. So what I did is like this. Okay, let's make this timeline only in here. So it only loop in here. Okay, so I will animate only the antenna first, like this. And then animate something else. And then I animate the whole thing. So this is the order of things you got to do in Quill. Otherwise, you couldn't catch that antenna. It's going to move around so fanatically. You cannot catch it. Like if I want to animate it now, I need to grab it somewhere else in the air. So this is something also you have to plan out. You may ask, like, why do I need to plan out? Because you want to keep the vertex number the same. If you do something, it's really hard to add or remove things. Sometimes I have to duplicate this layer. I would do like duplicate it. And then if I screw it up, I have to delete the whole layer and to start over, because I know it's actually important for this project to have motion blur. So that's why I have to carefully only animate the antenna first, and then move the shell, and then move the whole thing. So those are the order of things you have to keep in mind. Only animate the smallest thing at the very beginning. And yeah, do you have any questions? Anyone so far?
I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay, awesome. So, and yeah, that's about how to export things in Cinema.
Can you talk a little bit about the length, duration? It looks like you keep everything the same duration, and if you have an animation that might be like offset, how to export that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's always easy to keep it the same length, right?
Yes. So I'm gonna show every layer. So now you can see the inspiration I have is from a Twitter like animation I really like. This is the color palette. I think it's just working like super well with that forest scene, because there's a lot of green in it, and this is what happens for creatures in the forest. And then I actually start everything in the center. So compared to what you see in the Cinema 4D scene, it's not actually scattered all over the place, and everything's actually in the center. So I know, like when I animate it, I know if it's off center, if it's going to places I don't want it to be. So now, oh, it's low, don't worry. So everything moves actually in the center. And everything has the same length, just like what Guru pointed out. So now it loops actually, exactly on the same rhythm. And you can actually make it offset. So we have something that's shorter, I think. Oh, not in this one. But I want to make sure everything works in sync. So now you can see it works in sync. The reason I do it because I want this scissor to cut the bamboo, right? I want to make sure every time the scissor jumps, cuts the bamboo. And if it has different number of frames, it's gonna offset and offset more the longer you play it. So that's why I make everything within the 2 seconds. So this is how I plan the whole scene. And this is also the behind the scene, like the flying birds and all of other. If I open the new file, you will immediately see, okay. I try to plan out the space as well. So every time you will see something above, like the layout of the scene, there's always something in the above or on the floor. So there's never like a vacancy. Also, it follows the rule of the layout. Like if you're doing layouts in graphic design, you want something to have like a huge mass, but you also need something like only small elements just to balance the whole frame. So this is what I do in every angle. So I want to make sure, like in any angle, there will be something balance the weight. So it's a very balanced scene. This is something also a behind the scene. Just want to mention it to create this like film look like the animation. And yeah, so this is about everything in Quill. I'm now gonna jump back to Cinema 4D. So the last thing I want to mention here is how do you actually use the cameras? And camera is actually a very important factor here. In this one, it doesn't move. It's actually a parallel camera. So you actually see only from this perspective, and also everything in the same view is actually not, the further it goes, the smaller it gets. Actually, everything is the same size. So this is how this animation looks. And now I want to mention how do you actually export the camera. Okay, and this is the camera scene. And you can.
I have a quick question, Zeyu, about the animations again. When you export them from Quill, right?
Yeah.
As in Alembic format, I believe. If you have animations with different durations, then those are separate exports that you import into Cinema 4D, right? So, for example, if you have one that's like 24 frames long, one that is 58 long or something, then those would be separate exports, right?
Okay. It's actually not separated export. So I'm going to show you what happens here. So
that's cool.
Every animation here, you can see it's actually on the right, you can see the list.
Yeah.
I'm going to refresh the render so you can see all the animation. Okay. Yeah, in one of those frames, or I don't know what happened. But you can see any of those have their own mode. So this is what Cinema 4D offers.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So this is what I didn't see this in Blender, but Cinema 4D has very robust control of Alembic file. So you can choose to loop it, ping pong it, just to play it. And also you have this speed dialog, which is like, I want to play this Alembic file in 50% speed. I can do that. And also I can actually offset it. Despite this offset is like also just a replacement of you moving it yourself on the timeline. It's basically say, okay, I want to play this 240 frames later. This is something you can actually do right here without going to the timeline and drag it yourself. So
basically, to understand correctly, this is like within one Alembic export, you have individual controls of each container that's in that Alembic file?
Exactly.
Wow.
So you see all those, you can see here. You don't worry about the renders. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So I'm just going to just look here. So if I select anything like this one, it's actually, I can control like this 50%. And then can select a different character and we'll say, oh, you want to double the speed. You want to be fast. So you can individually control it, and you can individually control how it plays. Like you want to ping pong this only this character, you can do it.
That's cool.
Also, it's also nested. So which means everything here is under this object called root, right? So you also have to go to this root to say, oh, I want to make it loop, play, ping pong, like it's nested, right? So
as far as I understand, in Maya, you can only do that. Like not individually, but only the master Alembic, right? Like, so that's why, and maybe I'm missing something, an option there in Maya, but what I usually do is if I have different durations for animations, I make sure that they are different exports, and then I can individually set the offset and loops, because then I have like multiple routes basically, right? So it's pretty amazing that you have the controls here like in Cinema 4D. I have to look into Maya if Maya can do that too, but I don't believe so.
Yes, and this only came after R21 or 23. It's very recent. It's actually 3 years ago. They only implemented 3 years ago. So
Super
beforehand, we don't have this either.
Yeah.
And you can individual also control their like position. Like I want to make this higher, lower. I can individually change the material of this one character. I can do it, and I don't need import it again. Everything is I import it once and just work with it forever. So this is the perks of Cinema 4D in here. Because I tried Blender and I didn't find anything close to this control. So that's why I always do the flow in Cinema 4D. And also, just 2 days ago, R25, Cinema 4D R25 released, and it has even better timeline control over here. It's actually called like clip control or something like that. So you can actually change like frame rate. You can change how smooth it plays. So all of those I'm gonna test and also just to post it when I have some results and everyone can see it.
It's another class. So
yeah, it's gonna be super powerful. I'm just gonna post a video showing that, and everyone can try it out in R25. The new interface is really like Blender. You can search that and you realize that. Yeah, so this is the powerful tool of Cinema 4D. So everything is in one file, and if you export it from Quill, it actually replaces it automatically, so you don't have to re-import. If you change anything, if you haven't added new layer, if the layer is consistent, you can just re-export in Quill and everything is updated here. So it's also very convenient. Of course, you have to quit it and reload this, but it's really fast to reload everything. And also, I have done this. It's just importing the Quill camera here. So this is something I'm not going to show it in Quill. It's super easy just to have a plane attached to your camera, right? This is just group them with the camera, having a little plane in the... So if you look closely, there used to be this. So this is... this camera is actually from Quill. So this little plane, I just use a ribbon brush. I paint a little, just a rectangle in front of the camera. And this is something I hide later in Cinema 4D. I'm just using the position of this rectangle to use this information to move this null object, which attached the camera. I'm gonna share this file using like WeTransfer or something. Just everyone can get it because if you don't like nodes, it might be just so confusing. But basically, what I did is this is the Quill camera. This is just a name camera, but it can be anything.
It's a plane, right?
Yeah, it's that plane. And then I'm trying to access the polygon data of it, like the normal of that. Polygon, so the center of that polygon, and then I feed that into some calculation. So you may wonder, what is calculation? Can you just one line and that's it? Because in Cinema 4D they are using the radian system is different. They use the number like 30 degree or 40 degree, and so that's kind of the system used in. I think in Quill, but also there are other decimal, also representing the rotation. So it's different. So we have to convert it into the metric system that Cinema 4D understand. So we need to, subtract and so I'm gonna just upload this. So this whole process is actually just converting what's the term? It's the radian to numbers, and then feed it into the null object. To use that controls the global position, rotation of the null point one, this object, which is this object that's controlling the camera. So now you can actually using this plane to control the camera. So it actually moves exactly the same in Quill. And hopefully, like in the next few patches, there will be a more automatic, way to do this. But currently, this is like a workaround. You can just use the camera. It doesn't have to be smooth. You can jump camera from this position to another position just to you cut in a filmmaking. So I will see this like very convenient to do. And this is something also you can do in Cinema 4D. I don't know if you can do it in other platform, but it's very similar logic, just to attach the normal of the plane to your camera, and you can do that.
Yeah, I usually used, I think, vertex parenting in Maya, but what you just said, where you let the camera jump, that doesn't work with one because it gets super confused,
Yeah.
But so I'm pretty sure that you can also attach null to the center of the polygon and stuff as well. But geometry constraint is another way, right? A simple way.
Yeah, and there's just so many things about Alembic that limits your, the thing you can do, because like in Alembic, it treats the whole thing as a one file. So if you want to just access, if you just parent your camera to this, let's say like I drag this camera to this Quill file, it wouldn't work. Just because the Alembic sender is always in the middle. It doesn't care what you create, how fast it moves. So that's why you have this workaround. You have to go to this little plane and select one of the face and use this face data and to create this whole tracking. It doesn't actually recognize the whole thing. It only recognizes the thing you select. And also, if you go to the structure tab, this is where I talk about points. Like this is Cinema 4D or 3D software keep track of every point in this object. You can see how it numbers it, like 0, 1, 2, 3. It try to make sense of all those points on this object. So like if I select 9, it knows this is the number 9 points. The computer remembers that. And this is the number 10 points. It's pretty arbitrary, but it will remember it. So any change you in Quill will corrupt this sequence, and suddenly the computer don't understand the motion of this object. That's why in the previous I said, always duplicate your object, and then the order of the points always stay constant.
Doron is asking, why the orthographic camera choice, since that's something that you can't really do in actual stop motion, unless I misunderstood the explanation.
Orthographic, you can. This is perspective. You can always change it, camera to parallel, and suddenly it's orthographic, and it works. Like it depends on what you want. So I don't know if I get the question right.
I'm not sure. Doron, you want to elaborate on your question? I'm not sure either.
Yeah, well, it was a bit of a while ago, but there was a point where you said I want to put the camera in a way like to basically make it orthographic, so there's no perspective. It was kind of like an orthographic thing, and so unless I misunderstood it, I was wondering why you wanted to do that instead of just using a regular perspective camera. But maybe I just misunderstood the point.
Oh yeah, I was just saying I used the parallel camera for that project. I didn't say it's necessary to use that. It's just artistic choice to use a parallel camera. Yeah.
Got it.
All right, this is actually the introduction of like moving from Quill to Cinema 4D. So now we can start to do the Q&A, and let me know if you have any questions.
Cool. Do you want to run Discwoods in the background so we can see it, like the video itself? That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And now I got why you did it. Because the rotation makes it clear. Like, it's a cool effect.
Yeah, thanks. So this is also something I did. This is actually, the cloth is actually from the Marvelous designer. And this is what makes it looks more real, is because the cloth is actually moving with the Alembic.
What is
Alembic file.
cloud is so fucking hard to simulate. Oh, jeez, Rick. It's so
I see
fucking
another
real.
class for that. So basically, you can import Alembic file into Marvelous Designer and then drop a cloth object on there, or?
Yeah, you just do your cloth inside of a Marvelous designer and export it out. And then you can immediately have something so realistic. Yeah.
Wow. Awesome, man. I don't see any questions, but this was like really, really cool class. Thanks for all the insights. This was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Join
thank you.
his YouTube channel.
Yeah, I got like a playlist of Quill Pro tips. Like in there, you can find a lot of advanced tips for Quill. Including the one I mentioned is the how to just use one keyframe but letting the Cinema 4D generate everything in between. It's actually in the channel, so you can check that out.
That's cool. Yeah, one thing I like to add actually, because you went the route with like one color per character, right?
Yeah.
What I've been experimenting with is actually I paint the character in Quill, like with some gradients and lighting and stuff like that. And it's interesting, like with the actual lighting, final lighting in mind, right? So I think of it that I will probably light it in a similar manner. And then you get like an extra amount of fidelity, which is interesting when you use vertex color, right? So that's another method you can do, is just like mixing another color in there, or even fake some ambient occlusion in the Quill geometry already, right? And then it overlaps. And that's also like an interesting look. And I think Edward did something like that in his pipeline, right? Like 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and this is the last point I want to build upon what you just said, is that always treating the Quill vertex color as a map. Then you actually can create like smoothness in Cinema 4D. In some films, actually, I didn't use the roughness. I didn't use this map. Instead, I actually used the vertex map in the roughness. Nice. And then all the white objects will look very like not smooth, and all the darker objects will look super smooth. And then I can actually achieve different materials just using everything, every information in Quill. So this is sense, always like use this like in any way you want, and give you very different result.
Yeah, I think Matt Schaefer used it for the emission, texture emission, right? Yeah. So something starts glowing when it's white, and something stays opaque and not without emission when it's black, right? So there's tons of things you can do. It's like really, really cool, this workflow. So we never had Quill to Cinema 4D, so this was our first. So thank you so much, Zeyu. This was really amazing.
Yeah, and, thanks for having me here. I will see you next time.